Yum yums.
Hi fussy friends, I'm Beth Bonfilio, a clinical nutritionist who specialises in fussy eating, and for the past 5 years I've helped over 300 families worldwide get their very reluctant and fussy kids to be mindful healthy eaters. And I often get asked, what exactly is my secret? And how do I get a child who practically survives on junk, avoids food and would much rather starve, to eat healthily, willingly and peacefully? So in this video I'm going to share with you my number one top tip. But before I do, if you or your child dread meal times, it's a constant battle, or perhaps you've just given up and you supply what's on demand, even if it's junk or empty calories, then there's a link below that's going to take you to my free tasting technique, which we use to get kids tasting new foods again. So like I said before, I've developed a hugely successful online program which promises to turn a little Fusspot into a healthy eater in as little as 4 weeks. I want to share with you the 4 most common causes for fussy eating, and I want you to stick around for number 1 because it's going to blow your mind and definitely have you questioning all of the advice you've been given in the past. So let's start with number 4, which is force feeding. Marcy at my mother's group 6 years ago when I had my son was sharing all of her tips and tricks on how to pack as many nutrients as possible into a bowl of pureed food. And it seemed like a logical thing to do for us. I thought I was really clever to come up with a black bean puree with roasted beetroot and cinnamon. Yeah, that stuff looked like red concrete in both consistency and colour, and oh boy did my son hate it. But you know, so much pressure to raise a healthy child that I kept coming up with new ideas to keep shoveling that food right in. I think my game was called off at about the age of 14 months when he learned how to hold his hands over his mouth, shake his head and cry. Now you may not think that you're force feeding and simply just assisting from a spoon, but consider this. We're born with 5 senses and a child needs to learn how to use them. The first available opportunity to exercise 4 of these senses is when food is present, so at weaning stage. So think about it. If you supplied each mouthful of pureed mush, how is a child able to use touch, taste, smell and sight to make a decision? And most importantly, how are they going to learn to listen to the signs of hunger and fullness if you've always decided this for them? Baby-led weaning all the way, guys. That's my strong recommendation. You'll certainly have a far less chance of having a fussy eater if you adopt this way of introducing food to an infant. Now, the third most common cause of a fussy eater is anxiety. You probably feel it each time you think about the mealtime ahead, especially if you have a fussy eater, but rest assured that if you're feeling anxiety at mealtimes, your child is too, and sometimes tenfold, even to the point where the child gags. If you think about it, what's the best way to elevate a symptom of anxiety? Surprise, right? Jumping out and saying boo to a person will scare them. Feeling overwhelmed by information breeds anxiety, and so does unfamiliarity of a situation. A child with no prior warning about meal times will forever be surprised by food. So within our intensive programs, we implement lots of visual charts that even an 18-month-old will understand, just to help them to understand what's expected of them at mealtimes and also what food will be on offer. Now, the second most common cause is empty calories. Yeah, I get it. You've given up the fight. Little Jimmy has shown you that he would much rather go hungry than eat the meal you've slaved over for hours. And this has happened one too many times that you've resorted to supplementing his diet with fats, sugars and calories. The problem here is that they're now devoid of important nutrients, and the brain is telling them that they want more of that junky stuff that turns to sugar in the system. I bet you didn't have the intention of raising a child with the goal of just survival. I bet you had every intention of raising a healthy and happy child that thrives. But somehow that little guy got his way. He wore you down, he pulled on your heartstrings and led you down this junk food path. It's a path I see almost daily, and it's certainly not a hard one to recover from. But with this last common cause, there is always a precursor, and that leads me into the number 1 reason you have a fussy eater. Dairy. Yes, the most common being cow's milk or formulas. This cause, unlike the others, has so many factors to blame, but I'm only going to get into the biological reasons as to why it's the most common cause of a fussy eater. Dairy is the number 1 cause for constipation and slow gastric emptying. In Australia alone, over 15,000 children were admitted to hospital between the age of 1 and 3 with severe constipation and slow gastric emptying. Why? Dairy. When we're babies, we used to have the ability to be able to break down the proteins in milk because we had an abundance of lactase, which is the enzyme responsible for breaking lactose down. But around the age of 9 months, we start to diminish our stores and start to become intolerant. Now, this really puzzles parents because the child would have shown absolutely no symptoms prior to a dairy intolerance, other than perhaps reflux, which is certainly a sign. But slowly, these symptoms begin to appear between the age of around 9 months to 1 year old. But did you know that research tells us that over 85% of us adults are actually intolerant to dairy as well? Makes you wonder why it's suggested as a life source for our infants, right? Who has taken their malnutrition, starving child to a doctor for advice and been told that so long as he's drinking milk, he's getting all that he needs? What? Seriously? A child needs calcium, fat and protein and that's it? Luckily, I have over 5 years of experience that says removing dairy completely from a child's diet for at least 6 weeks will remove this most common cause of fussy eating. Why are we encouraged to give more calcium-rich sources than water-soluble vitamins like vitamin B and C? Our bones can absorb calcium, right? So why do we need so much? And do you know what happens when we have too much calcium in our diet? Yeah, it removes iron from our bodies, amongst other minerals. Aha, yes, anemia is another common cause for fussy eating. You see, like I said, dairy has quite a multi-directional link to fussy eating. Now, I could talk about the topic of dairy all day long, and I'm sure you'd like to know more. I'm happy to answer questions you have below in the comments. If you like this video, please tick on the tick and help a friend out in need by sharing it. I would also love to hear what you've got to say on the topic. I'm sure you've got lots to say, or perhaps any questions that you have. Please comment below, and I'd actually like to know if you're now considering removing dairy from your child's diet, and if you have, I'd love to see what results you've received from it.
Yum yums.